Los Angeles cannot walk into 2026 settling for comfort zones. Herbert is locked in, but behind him, a quiet competition is taking shape. On the market, an explosive veteran is testing the front office's nerve. And on defense, two pass rushers carry the burden of replacing lost production. We are not handing out free praise today. We are separating depth from complacency, opportunity from desperation, and potential from real impact. If you demand a roster built to survive when January tightens the screws, hit like and subscribe. 4 different stories put the same challenge in front of the Chargers. Who is ready to produce right now? We'll start where there is no debate. Justin Herbert is the Chargers' starting quarterback, the face of the franchise, and the reason every season has to be treated as a legitimate chance to make noise in the AFC. 6 NFL seasons have already erased any manufactured conversation about the top spot. The real discussion begins directly behind him, and Los Angeles cannot treat it like some minor preseason detail. Trey Lance is back for another year, and right now, he is the legitimate QB2. He brings mobility, stepped onto the field when Herbert was needed elsewhere, and earned enough trust from the organization to return. He also has a connection with Mike McDaniel from their time together in San Francisco. But familiarity cannot become immunity. Lance has been in the league longer, worked in different systems, and received opportunities most developmental quarterbacks never get. Even so, he still has not put together a stretch in a Chargers uniform that wipes away every question about his value as a long-term answer. That is where DJ Uiagalelei turns a room that looks settled into a much more uncomfortable evaluation. He arrived in Los Angeles as an undrafted free agent in 2025, after a college career that began with first-round expectations and ended with a disappointing stop at Florida State. His arm and physical frame were never the main issue. Inconsistent mechanics, erratic decisions, and an inability to repeat quality throws are what crushed his draft stock. Those are also the exact flaws that can be developed when a player gets patience, repetition, and a coaching staff capable of rebuilding habits. The signals coming out of the offseason program pointed to better consistency and cleaner execution from Uiagalelei as a passer. That does not mean he enters training camp ready to rip the backup job away from Lance. That would be forcing the story. It means something more useful. The coaching staff now has a real test on its hands. Every practice period, every preseason series, and every decision under pressure can show whether the progress made away from live games holds up when the defense speeds up and the throwing window disappears. Do not watch only for the pretty ball either. I want to see how he sets the protection, responds after a mistake, identifies the free defender, and prevents a broken play from becoming a disaster. A backup quarterback does not need to sell a highlight show. He needs to keep the offense from falling apart. If Uiagalelei shows command, baseline accuracy, and real mental growth, the meaningful battle may not happen now. He may be building toward the 2027 competition, when the organization will once again decide how much to invest behind Herbert. That is the right kind of pressure on Lance. This is not a campaign to knock him out in July. It is a demand for his experience to show up on the field. The veteran should win this competition because he plays better, not because his name sits higher on the depth chart. And the younger quarterback has to prove he is more than an interesting collection of tools. In a stable quarterback room, training camp now carries an aggressive question. Does Los Angeles have only a backup for 2026, or is it developing a cheaper, more promising option for the following year? Uiagalelei is not threatening Herbert. He is threatening complacency, and that is healthy for any serious roster. From an internal competition to a decision that takes some nerve, Stefon Diggs is still available, and at least 5 teams have checked in on his situation as training camps approach. Los Angeles has not been identified as one of them. There is an opportunity here that Joe Hortiz needs to evaluate with speed, discipline, and absolutely no fascination with the name on the back of the jersey. Diggs is 32 years old, has played 11 NFL seasons, and is unlikely to find a long-term deal that treats his past as a guarantee of his future. That is exactly why the conversation deserves attention. A short contract changes the balance between cost and potential return. Last season in New England, he caught 85 passes for 1,013 yards and 4 touchdowns, serving as one of Drake May's primary options on a team that reached the Super Bowl. The recent production is there. There is off-field baggage as well, and any interested team needs to investigate the player, the contract, and the locker room fit with real seriousness. Doing the work does not mean automatically walking away. Teams that intend to win establish the exact level of risk they are willing to accept. On the field, the argument is brutally simple. Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston headline the wide receiver room. Brennan Thompson adds speed and developmental upside. This offense can still manufacture production through motion, formations, the running game, and its tight ends. But the playoffs do not care about projections. When a physical secondary erases the first read and squeezes the field, Herbert needs a veteran receiver who can recognize coverage, adjust his route, and win on third down without forcing his quarterback to create an impossible play. Diggs would not arrive as a permanent savior, and he should not be treated like the owner of the offense. He would arrive to raise the unit's floor and give McDaniel one more threat to manage. In the slot, outside, in motion, or isolated against a second cornerback, his presence could change how defenses distribute coverage. Slide help toward McConkey, and Diggs gets a cleaner matchup. Respect the veteran, and Ladd finds space. If both draw attention, the running game gets room to breathe. That is how a short-term signing can create consequences far bigger than the length of the contract. This is where aggression has to be separated from recklessness. Los Angeles should not enter a bidding war over reputation, hand out excessive guarantees, or ignore other options. The team needs to establish the price, the role, and the standard of conduct before moving forward. If another organization pays as though Diggs is still at his peak, let that team own the gamble. If the market produces a controlled, incentive-based contract with a defined role alongside Herbert, standing still starts to look like fear. What about bringing back Keenan Allen? That door may remain open, but so far there has been no reported contact about a new deal. Keenan offers chemistry and an understanding of zone coverage. Diggs creates a different kind of stress, and his market could move quickly. The mistake would be waiting until every option disappears and then calling passivity patience. The Chargers cannot ask Herbert to compensate alone once the postseason compresses the field. I would make the call. I would demand answers to the hard questions. I would put a prove-it contract on the table only if the entire internal review approved the risk. That is not begging a star to come save you. It is using the market to protect a competitive window. Diggs may choose another destination. One of those 5 teams may move first. The price may never fit, but if Los Angeles refuses even to test the door while looking for experience, it is turning down valuable information. In the AFC, hesitation is a decision too, and the bill usually arrives when nobody is left to fix the problem. While the offense debates whether it needs to import experience, the defense already has a player demanding recognition at home. Tuli Tuipulotu should not enter 2026 being treated like a nice little prospect. After posting 13 sacks, 70 pressures, and 2 forced fumbles in 2025, he comes into this season facing 2 enormous demands. Repeat that production without Odafe Oweh beside him, and prove his next contract will pay for future dominance instead of rewarding one isolated peak. During his first few years, Tuli showed he could line up outside, attack from the interior, and disrupt the backfield without being tied to one role. The production took time to catch up with what appeared on film. In 2025, that changed. With Khalil Mack and Oweh in the rotation, Tuipulotu answered with star-level numbers. More importantly, his arsenal expanded. The agility showed up. His hands became more refined. So did his understanding of how to set up a blocker before delivering the finishing move. Chris O'Leary now takes over the defense and inherits a structure that worked under Jesse Minter. The expectation is that he will preserve much of the zone foundation and multiplicity that helped the Chargers finish in the top 10 against the pass in consecutive seasons. Some details could change, including wider alignments and a broader pressure package. For Tuli, that needs to become fuel. A defender seeking elite money has to be the piece that makes the entire system more dangerous. There is obvious disrespect in the national perception. Tuipulotu did not receive a single vote in ESPN's recent edge rusher rankings after a season that should have forced the league to take another look. Good. Save that ranking. Recognition handed out in July does not knock down a quarterback. If Tuli keeps creating pressure and owns the critical snaps left behind by Oweh's departure, the conversation will change when the games actually matter. We are not going to use outside disrespect to dodge the financial question either. An extension approaching $30 million per year would place Tuli beside players already treated as stars. That number carries responsibility. The club must decide whether to pay him before another strong season drives up the price, or accept the risk of negotiating later with less control. The player, meanwhile, has to prove that 2025 established a new standard. A massive contract brings more visibility, turns every sackless stretch into a debate, and puts every matchup against an elite tackle under a microscope. In my war room, the priority would be getting the extension done without handing over a blank check. Tuli has the age, recent production, versatility, and fit to become part of this defense's core. Allowing a homegrown pass rusher to drift closer to the open market could cost even more. At the same time, the structure has to protect the Chargers and reward availability and production. I want to know how you would handle this negotiation. Get it done before camp? Wait through part of the season? Demand another complete year? Put your strategy in the comments because yelling, "Pay the man!" is not enough here. We are talking about building a sustainable defense around a player who can stop being underrated and enter the group of names that change an opponent's protection plan. That brings us to the player who could determine whether Oweh's departure is a manageable loss or a hole this defense cannot hide. Akheem Mesidor went 22nd overall in the 2026 NFL Draft because the Chargers saw more than a rookie with a relentless motor. They saw a movable weapon for a front that lost the 11 sacks and 39 pressures Oweh produced on only 247 pass rushing snaps, including the playoffs. That is not a small rotational role to replace. That is concentrated impact walking out the door. The Los Angeles pass rush was not the problem in 2025. The Chargers recorded 45 sacks and a 23.6% pressure rate, both above the league average. Oweh also delivered 3 sacks in the wildcard loss to New England. He is now in Washington on a 4-year, $96 million contract with $68 million guaranteed. Mac, Tuli, and Bud Dupree cannot absorb everything without wearing down. This rotation needs a new source of athletic violence. Mesidor offers that possibility. In his final season at Miami, he recorded 12.5 sacks and 67 pressures. He elevated his game in the college football playoff, producing 5.5 sacks and 24 pressures from the matchup against Texas A&M through the national championship game. Joe Hortiz highlighted his relentless motor, production, and strength against the run. Jim Harbaugh described him as a worker and a natural fit for the culture. Those are the concrete reasons behind the first-round investment. Versatility is the detail that could fully unleash O'Leary. Mesidor has already worked inside the tackles and on the edge. In 2024, he played more than 200 snaps from interior alignments, producing 2 sacks and 14 pressures from those spots. Harbaugh called him an all-down player, someone capable of rushing inside and holding up against the run. With versatile pieces, the coaching staff can get creative without announcing its intentions before the snap. Picture the problem. Mac occupies one side, Tuli kicks inside, Mesidor starts wide and attacks a guard on the next snap. The offense has to identify the primary matchup without knowing who will stay in which space. O'Leary can simulate pressure or simply let 4 defenders win. Creativity still demands responsibility. A non-stop motor without discipline opens a running lane. Versatility without technique becomes pretty movement before the ball is snapped. There are risks. Mesidor turned 25 in April and has a history that includes shoulder surgery and foot injuries. Age and availability matter when a team spends a first-round pick. The Chargers accepted those concerns because they saw readiness, production, and versatility. Now they have to manage his workload and keep the urgency to replace Oweh from forcing the rookie into a role bigger than his preparation can handle. The ideal scenario does not require Mesidor to copy Oweh snap for snap. It requires him to change the math up front. If he can create interior pressure on third down, free Tuli to attack the best matchup, and preserve Mac over a full season, he will have already multiplied the value of the rotation. Add sacks in critical moments, and the 22nd pick can turn a painful loss into structural improvement. That possibility lights everything up, because Tuli is chasing star status while Mesidor is trying to prove he arrived ready. They push each other, and O'Leary gains options to preserve the defense's identity without living off Minter's past. The final demand is direct. Los Angeles did not draft Mesidor to decorate the depth chart, and it did not retain veterans to create headlines in July. This defense will be judged against quarterbacks who punish every extra second inside the pocket. Without Oweh, somebody has to win the snap that ends a drive, forces a field goal, or gives the ball back to Herbert. Mesidor has the motor, college production, and versatility to fill part of that space. Now comes the step this fan base knows far too well: turning tools into professional production. If he does that early, the Chargers will not have merely replaced pressure. They will have found a piece capable of making the entire front less predictable and far harder to block. These 4 stories leave behind an uncomfortable message. Stability cannot turn into complacency. Uiagalelei needs to push Lance. The front office needs to decide whether Diggs is worth a controlled gamble. Tuli needs to turn internal respect into national dominance. And Mesidor needs to restore the aggression this rotation lost with Oweh. That is how a contender behaves. It creates competition, investigates opportunities, and demands production from every piece. Pick the decision that cannot wait and tell me why in the comments. Subscribe to follow the next move, because nobody in Los Angeles gets to hide behind the word potential in 2026. Either this energy wins in January, or the pressure gets even heavier.